Cerebrolysin is the Rolls-Royce of neurogenesis. It might improve chronic brain fog after vigorous strenuous exercise, improve sleep quality, resolve addiction, offer nootropic effects, improving mood and cognition, all by increasing neurotropic factors in the brain. Turns out that only 15% to 25% peptide content, cerebrolysin doesn't contain any brain-derived neurotropic factor at all, but it might increase BDNF levels by 25 to 40%, acting as a neurotropic factor secretagogue. Keep watching if you'd like to know more. All will be explained in this cerebrolysin deep dive video. Vigorous Steve here. So you might have heard about cerebrolysin, a water-based mixture of peptides and free amino acids extracted from porcine cerebral tissue, aka pig brains. If you're a Muslim, you're Jewish, a Seventh-day Adventist Christian or Rastafarian, you can basically stop the video right here because your religious beliefs prevent you from consuming pork products of any kind. I'd still highly appreciate a like and a comment all your way out. I'll see you in the next deep dive video. However, I do feature a direct comparison between cerebrolysin and Cortexin, which is derived from the cerebral tissue of calves. Feel free to use the timestamps to skip ahead to see if Cortexin is a suitable replacement for cerebrolysin, but you might want to skip that section altogether if you're a Hindu. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. I couldn't find any scientific evidence where cerebrolysin was used by athletes, whether that was in the context of increasing performance or improve recovery, to reduce brain fog after vigorous strenuous exercise, or to mitigate traumatic brain injury following boxing or mixed martial arts or American football or ice hockey or slap fighting or any kind of contact sports of any form. Neither could I find any conclusive evidence that cerebrolysin helps to resolve addiction or offer nootropic effects in people who don't suffer from Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Basically, there's no scientific evidence for most cases where cerebrolysin is used by healthy individuals, albeit that there's some evidence where cerebrolysin helps with sleep deprivation. Don't worry, we'll get into all of that a little bit later on. Furthermore, you might have heard that cerebrolysin contains various neurotropic factors, including brain-derived neurotropic factor, ciliary neurotropic factor, glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, and nerve growth factor. I was convinced of this myself, but it turns out none of these bioidentical peptide hormones are contained within the peptide and free amino acid mixture that cerebrolysin is made of. So let's have a look into the composition of cerebrolysin and see what it actually contains. As always, this deep dive is fully evidence-based with a healthy amount of anecdotal experience mixed in. You can find all citations of what we're going to discuss in this video down below in the YouTube comment section. So without further ado, here's the composition of cerebrolysin. Regarding the storage instructions, you can keep it at room temperature not exceeding 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Protected from light. Again, cerebrolysin ampules are amber to prevent light from penetrating into the cerebrolysin mixture. And don't freeze it, obviously, because it still contains a good amount of bioactive peptides. Cerebrolysin comes in various ampule dosages, 2 milliliters, 5 milliliters, and 10 milliliters, but the concentration is always the same at 215.2 milligrams per 1 milliliter. Now, the peptide content, depending on the scientific evidence that you go with, all of the peptides have a molecular weight less than 10 kilodaltons, and the peptide content of cerebrolysin is approximately 15 to 25%. Passive diffusion of peptides and proteins across the blood-brain barrier is around 400 to 600 daltons, or 0.4 to 0.6 kilodaltons, although some peptides and proteins with a higher molecular weight can cross the blood-brain barrier via specific transporter mechanisms. Again, depending on the scientific evidence that you go with, the free amino acid content of cerebrolysin is anywhere between 75% to 85%. L-tryptophan seems to have the highest molecular weight of all the free amino acids and a molecular weight of 204.23 daltons, which allows L-tryptophan and all of the other free amino acids to passively diffuse through the blood-brain barrier because the highest it could possibly weigh is 400 to 600 daltons. So let's have a look into the molecular weight of various neurotropic factors to see if they can even pass the blood-brain barrier at all. Brain-derived neurotropic factor has a molecular weight of 27 kilodaltons, which is probably too high to pass the blood-brain barrier freely. Therapeutic delivery of BDNF has many obstacles related to its reasonably short in vivo half-life and uncertain blood-brain barrier permeability. BDNF in serum is reasonably unstable, and perhaps only a small fraction can cross the blood-brain barrier after administration. Low dosages of exogenous BDNF have limited permeability and might not have an observed nootropic beneficial effect at all. BDNF is rapidly metabolized by the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes. You can block this effect by taking a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzyme inhibitor. Don't worry, more on this later. But it seems that exogenous BDNF might not be warranted, and it's better to increase BDNF production within the brain directly with a neurotropic factor secretagogue. And when you look at the molecular weight of the other neurotropic factors, you see that they can't permeate the blood-brain barrier either. Glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor has a molecular weight of 30 kilodaltons, way too heavy. 7S nerve growth factor, there's several different kinds, has a molecular weight of 140,000 kilodaltons, way too heavy. Beta nerve growth factor has a molecular weight of 13 to 14 kilodaltons, and L cell nerve growth factor has a molecular weight of 160,000 kilodaltons approximately. Pro nerve growth factor has a molecular weight of 32 kilodaltons, and ciliary neurotropic factor has a molecular weight of 23 kilodaltons. All of these neurotropic factors way too heavy to pass the blood-brain barrier, so you need to increase neurotropic factor concentrations in the brain by taking a neurotropic factor secretagogue. And that brings us to the actual composition of cerebrolysin. Again, depending on the scientific evidence that you go with, cerebrolysin might contain anywhere between 638 to 810 separate peptides, mainly derived from tubulin alpha 1A chain or tubulin alpha 1B chain, phosphatidyl inositol biphosphate 3 kinase catalytic subunit gamma, actin, myelin basic protein, and uncharacterized peptides I3LNP3 or F1S3X7. 4 of these peptide fragments have been investigated regarding potential therapeutic benefits. So the first one, it's all letters, so we're not going to attempt to pronounce that. One of them might have potential beneficial effects for multiple sclerosis as a treatment option. 2 of them might be neuroprotective and have potential anti-inflammatory effects. And another one of them might be neuroprotective and has potential antioxidant properties. And again, in these studies investigating the composition of cerebrolysin, no precursor or fully bioidentical peptide hormones like brain-derived neurotropic factor, ciliary neurotropic factor, glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, or nerve growth factor were detected. I briefly want to highlight the studies which investigated the composition of cerebrolysin. First one is from Gavart et al., published on May 28th, 2015, titled Peptide Profiling of Internet-Obtained Cerebrolysin, just like I always do, using high-performance liquid chromatography, electrospray ionization, ion trap, and ultra-high-performance liquid chromatography, ion mobility, quadruple time of flight mass spectrometry. I guess they were very, very thorough in analyzing the internet-obtained cerebrolysin samples. In this study, the researchers brought cerebrolysin online just like the rest of us and analyzed the content with high-performance liquid chromatography, ultraviolet mass spectrometry, and compared the results with the sequences of neurotropic factors, including BDNF, GDNF, NGF, and CNTF. In the results of the study, you can see that the percentage of various peptides that were identified in the cerebrolysin sample, which are mainly derived from tubulin alpha 1A chain, tubulin alpha 1B chain, phosphatidyl inositol biphosphate 3 kinase catalytic subunit gamma, actin, myelin basic protein, and these uncharacterized peptides with funky names. Of these peptide sequences, peptide myelin basic protein fragment 114 to 126 was also studied for its possible role in the development of the autoimmune disease multiple sclerosis. It is hypothesized that this fragment of myelin basic protein could possibly be useful as a potential treatment for multiple sclerosis. So with the results of this study, I looked for potential beneficial effects of the other identified peptide fragments contained within cerebrolysin. Some of them might act as an angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor and offer antihypertensive effects. Some of them might have potential antimicrobial activity and offer immunomodulating effects. They might act as an antioxidant. Some of them offer mineral chelating activity or even contribute to collagen synthesis. None of which sounds very familiar to an enhanced effect regarding neurotropic factor activity in the brain. But let's proceed anyway. In the conclusion, the researchers mentioned that they identified 638 unique peptides within the cerebrolysin samples, none of which had known nootropic effects, and none of them were stemming from precursor peptides like BDNF, CNTF, GDNF, and NGF. However, a more recent study contests these results regarding the beneficial nootropic effects of cerebrolysin by doing a nano-liquid chromatography mass spectrometry analysis of their own. Unfortunately, the full publication of this study is locked behind a $50 paywall. I was still able to access it fully, but unfortunately I can't share the entire study with you guys. So let's just go over the abstract real quick, which basically tells you everything you need to know. This study was performed by Young et al., published in 2023, so that's very recent, titled Optimized Approach for Active Peptide Identification in Cerebrolysin by using Nano-Liquid Chromatography Mass Spectrometry. This study detected 810 unique peptides within cerebrolysin, 2 of which could offer potential anti-inflammatory effects, and the other could have potential antioxidant effects. These 3 peptides might be the neuroprotective components within cerebrolysin, albeit that a lot more scientific evidence still needs to be performed on which peptide chain might actually offer potential neuroprotective and antioxidant effects, because, well, 3 peptides out of 810, I would say that scientific evidence is a little bit thin. Needless to say, the scientific evidence regarding the beneficial effects of cerebrolysin in human subjects and animal models, extensive. So let's proceed anyway. Based on this scientific evidence and all of the scientific evidence which is coming in this deep dive, don't you worry, I'm going to have to conclude that cerebrolysin's beneficial effects probably come from acting as a neurotropic factor secretagogue, similar to how Semax, Selank, Dihexa, Nupept, or other nootropics which are known to increase brain-derived neurotropic factor levels in the brain act. And this could come by providing the peptide fragments or the free amino acids, which either directly influence neurotropic factor secretion in the brain or contribute to the production of neurotropic factors by acting as their building blocks. If you'd like to see a comprehensive deep dive on which neurotropic compounds increases neurotropic factors the most, comparing cerebrolysin to Semax, Selank, Dihexa, Nupept, etc., just let me know down below in the comment section. I would gladly make that comparison video so you know which compound increases BDNF, GNDF, CNTF, and NGF the most. But what do these freaking neurotropic factors actually do, and how do they work? And I'm glad you asked. Here's a brief rundown of what the function and the role of all of these neurotropic factors are and what you could potentially expect from cerebrolysin administrations. So here's the function of endogenously produced neurotropic factors. The case with brain-derived neurotropic factor is that it's involved in learning, memory, and mood. Brain-derived neurotropic factor promotes new nerve cell differentiation, growth, survival, and neurogenesis. And BDNF is expressed throughout the brain and central nervous system. Ciliary neurotropic factor is involved in motor neuron, sensory neuron, and glial cell differentiation and survival. Ciliary neurotropic factor aids in myelin production and repair. And CNTF aids in neuron regeneration following injury. Glial cell line derived neurotropic factor is involved in neuron function, regeneration, growth, and survival in the brain, central nervous system, and peripheral nervous system, but this mostly involves dopaminergic neurons. Glial cell line derived neurotropic factor supports neuronal glial interactions, and GDNF is essential for nervous system health. Nerve growth factor is involved in the transmission of touch, temperature, and pain. Nerve growth factor regulates growth and maintenance of neurons, and NGF is commonly elevated in people who recently have fallen in love. And these growth factors aren't exactly neurotropic factors, but it seems that cerebrolysin has a modulating effect on these peptide hormones, so I felt it was only fair to include them here. It modulates insulin like growth factor 1, which is involved in growth, development, and metabolism of nerve cells. Cerebrolysin modulates vascular endothelial growth factor, which is involved in the formation of new blood vessels, aka angiogenesis. And cerebrolysin modulates tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is involved in the immune system, acts as a pro-inflammatory cytokine, is produced by macrophages, T lymphocytes, and natural killer cells. And while BDNF, CNTF, GDNF, NGF and IGF-1 are continuously expressed within a normal, healthy brain, VE, GF, and TNFA are only produced during the healing process of an injured brain. And BDNF, CNTF, GDNF, NGF, IGF-1, and VE, GF all have anti-inflammatory properties, while TNFA operates as a pro-inflammatory messenger. So don't be discouraged that cerebrolysin doesn't contain direct neurotropic factors. There's plenty of scientific evidence that shows that cerebrolysin can increase neurotropic factors in the brain, albeit that this is all stemming from animal models because, well, the animals are euthanized and the brain is homogenized and they can actually check for a neurotropic factor content after various cerebrolysin administration protocols. But when it comes to human subjects, they can only check for neurotropic factors potentially stemming from the brain in serum. So we're going to have to go with the animal models in combination with the human data to come to some sort of suitable solution and explanation of how much particular neurotropic factors increase during particular cerebrolysin treatments. Cerebrolysin increases brain-derived neurotropic factor by 5.4 nanograms per milliliter in the serum of healthy individuals. This is observed after 4 weeks on 20 milliliters. Cerebrolysin by intravenous infusion for 4 weeks continuously. Now, this is stemming from a Russian study, which was available as a full publication. You can find it down below in case you're interested. I ran it through 3 translation softwares, but unfortunately, the baseline parameters of brain-derived neurotropic factor before the cerebrolysin treatment was initiated are unknown. So if you go with the healthy adult reference range on average for brain-derived neurotropic factor with a range of 14.5 to 21.57 nanograms per milliliter, that results in a brain-derived neurotropic factor increase of 25 to 37.2%. Again, I understand that I'm extrapolating dubiously here, but if it's not contained within the scientific evidence, then we're going to go with the next best thing, with the average reference range of healthy individuals regarding their BDNF levels in serum. In another study, cerebrolysin was shown to increase brain-derived neurotropic factor by 41.2% in the serum of Alzheimer's patients. This was observed after 8 weeks on 10 milliliters cerebrolysin by intravenous infusion 5 times weekly on week 1 to 4 and week 13 to 16 of the study. So they took an 8-week break in the middle of the treatment. Brain-derived neurotropic factor increased by 50.3% when cerebrolysin was combined with 5 milligrams donazepam at week 1 to 4 and 10 milligrams donazepam week 13 to 16. So every time cerebrolysin was administered, they either received 5 milligrams donazepam or 10 milligrams donazepam. And keep in mind that donazepam is a medication to treat Alzheimer's disease and dementia by acting as a reversely binding acetylcholine esterase inhibitor and thus increasing acetylcholine levels in the brain in a dose-dependent fashion. Cerebrolysin also increases brain-derived neurotropic factors by 20 to 30% after hippocampal neural stem cell grafts in an animal model using mice as the animals of choice, which was observed after 1 to 9 months on 5 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight through intraperitoneal injection, which is straight into the abdomen, which translates to 0.4 milliliters of cerebrolysin per 1 kilogram of body weight by intramuscular administration, which is very comparable to intraperitoneal administration for humans, because I highly doubt that you're going to shoot your cerebrolysin intraperitoneally. So let's stick with intramuscularly instead. And this is with using dose cal to get the human equivalent dose, meaning that a 100 kilogram bodybuilder would need to administer 40 milliliters cerebrolysin intramuscularly to get a similar effect. Cerebrolysin increases brain-derived neurotropic factor by 30% in the brain after seizure stemming from an animal model using rats, which is observed after 7 days on 2.5 milliliters cerebrolysin per 1 kilogram of body weight, again by intraperitoneal injection. So if we extrapolate that to the human equivalent dose using dose cal, that's also 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight by intramuscular administration daily, again for humans. Cerebrolysin increases brain-derived neurotropic factor gene expression by 18% after cellular oxidative stress stemming from an in vitro study using mouse neuroblastoma cell lines, but this is nothing compared to a 91% increase in brain-derived neurotropic factor with the CD choline, aka CDP choline groups. So maybe extrapolating from the scientific evidence, albeit highly dubiously, a combination of cerebrolysin with donazepam increasing acetylcholine levels in the brain has a heightened response to an increase in brain-derived neurotropic factors, albeit in serum, right, based on human subjects. And in this in vitro study, acetylcholine increases brain-derived neurotropic factors by a factor of almost 5. So I would say that there's something to say to combine cerebrolysin with something that increases acetylcholine levels in the brain. And whether that's donazepam or acetylcholine, I'll leave that entirely up to you. Cerebrolysin increases glial cell line-derived neurotropic factors by 130 to 160% in the brain, stemming from an animal model using mice. This is observed after 3 months on 5 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight, again by intraperitoneal injection, which translates again to 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight intramuscularly daily for humans, meaning 40 milliliters cerebrolysin if you're 100 kilograms. Cerebrolysin increases nerve growth factor by 30% in the brain from an animal model using mice, and this was observed after 3 months on 5 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight by intraperitoneal injection daily, again 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight intramuscularly daily for humans. Cerebrolysin offers similar effects to ciliary neurotropic factor, glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, and insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2 in the brain, stemming from an in vitro study using cultured adult rat hippocampal progenitor cells. Cerebrolysin increases insulin-like growth factor 1 by 2.5 to 3.1% in the serum of Alzheimer's patients. I would say that that's negligible. It's observed after 12 weeks on 10 milliliters, 30 milliliters, or 60 milliliters, 5 times weekly at week 1 to 4, and 10 milliliters, 30 milliliters, and 60 milliliters, 2 times weekly from week 5 to 12. There's a 2% increase of insulin-like growth factor 1 in the placebo group, which is very comparable to the cerebrolysin group, and a 3.3% reduction in the 30 milliliter cerebrolysin group. So if you want to go with this scientific evidence regarding an increase in IGF-1 levels, either less or more, right? But not in between. Don't find the middle ground. You either take 10 milliliters cerebrolysin 5 times per week or 60 milliliters because, well, an increase of 2.5% or 3.1%, negligible results. If you want an increase in IGF-1 levels, spend your money on growth hormone. And on the other side of that, cerebrolysin was shown to lower insulin growth factor 1 levels by 2.9% in the serum of diabetic rats, which again was observed after 4 weeks on 2.5 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight by intraperitoneal injection daily, which translates to 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight by intramuscular administration daily for humans. Cerebrolysin lowers tumor necrosis factor alpha by 1.3% to 10.6% in the serum of Alzheimer's patients. This was observed after 12 weeks on 10 milliliters, 30 milliliters, or 60 milliliters 5 times weekly from week 1 to 4, and 10 milliliters, 30 milliliters, or 60 milliliters 2 times weekly at week 5 to 12. Now, there's a 12.6% increase in tumor necrosis factor alpha in the placebo group, and a 1% increase in the 30 milliliter cerebrolysin group. So, and if this sounds low, a mere reduction of 10.6% in the 60 milliliter cerebrolysin group, keep in mind that there's a 12.6 increase in the placebo group, meaning a 23.2% gap between the placebo group and the cerebrolysin group. So technically, you could say that cerebrolysin at 60 milliliters 5 times weekly for 4 weeks and then 2 times weekly for another 8 weeks lowers tumor necrosis factor alpha by 23.2%, again, compared to the placebo, aka baseline groups. And cerebrolysin lowers tumor necrosis factor alpha by 18% in the serum of diabetic rats, and it lowers tumor necrosis factor alpha by 20% in the brain after seizure. And when you convert that to the human equivalent dose, it's exactly the same as all of the other dosages, which I mentioned earlier, 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight by intramuscular administration daily. Now, I know this isn't very actionable and tangible information to help you decide on a particular dosing protocol, so I took the liberty to summarize all scientific evidence and combine the therapeutic dosages investigated in human subjects with the human equivalent dose stemming from the animal models and give you some sort of dosing guidelines based on body weight with 10 kilogram increments. So here are the neurotropic factor modulating cerebrolysin dosages, fully evidence-based. If you want a 20% to 41% increase in brain-derived neurotropic factor, you'll have to go with either 10 milliliters to 20 milliliters cerebrolysin by intravenous infusion 5 times weekly, or 0.4 milliliters cerebrolysin per 1 kilogram of body weight with intramuscular administration daily. And if you want to increase your brain-derived neurotropic factor to 50.3%, then you need to combine cerebrolysin with 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams donazepam at least 5 times weekly to increase your acetylcholine levels in the brain. If you want 130 to 160% increase in glial cell line derived neurotropic factor, you stick with the exact same dosing guidelines of 0.4 milliliters cerebrolysin per 1 kilogram of body weight intramuscularly daily. If you want a 30% increase in nerve growth factor, same dosing guidelines. And if you want a 1.3 to 23.2% reduction in tumor necrosis factor alpha, albeit that the higher percentage is a little bit dubiously extrapolated, then you go with either 10 milliliters cerebrolysin or 60 milliliters cerebrolysin intravenously 5 times weekly, or again, the exact same dosing guidelines based on body weight mentioned earlier. That means that the dosage ranges for cerebrolysin are anywhere between 10 milliliters to 60 milliliters, either by intramuscular administration or intravenous infusion 5 times weekly, or again 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight intramuscularly daily, which results for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder, again, in a 40 milliliter cerebrolysin administration intramuscularly or intravenously, if you do so prefer, 5 times weekly up to daily. The rest of the calculations are on the screen. And basically, of these dosages falls within the guidelines of 10 milliliters to 60 milliliters cerebrolysin daily by intramuscular administration or intravenous infusion. Since cerebrolysin is considered a biohacking compound, let's take that biohacking to the next level and prevent the breakdown of neurotropic factors in the hypothalamus and the neurons, glial cells, and endothelial cells of the blood-brain barrier, as well as in the bloodstream and various other tissues of the body, by combining cerebrolysin with the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor. Dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes break down various growth factors and neurotropic factors, including the ones that cerebrolysin are known to increase within the brain and the bloodstream. Whether the peptide fragments contained within cerebrolysin are substrates for the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes, that I couldn't verify. Dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors are a class of medications used to treat type 2 diabetes. They work by preventing the breakdown of two incretins, glucagon-like peptide 1 and glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, also known as gastric inhibitory polypeptide, abbreviated to GIP in both instances, which means that dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors might lower appetite by increasing GLP-1 and GIP levels in the bloodstream. Although the scientific evidence is a little bit thin on this subject, I was able to find a couple studies that prove that dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors increase brain-derived neurotropic factor levels in the serum of patients with either type 2 diabetes or Alzheimer's disease and might offer neuroprotection overall. And this has been scientifically proven for linagliptin, sitagliptin, and vildagliptin, but I couldn't find any evidence that this is the case for the other dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, of which there are many. It seems that dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors are associated with improved vascular function by increasing vascular endothelial growth factor levels, and they're also known to increase insulin growth factor levels in serum, but I couldn't find any direct scientific evidence that dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors influence ciliary neurotropic factor or cell line derived neurotropic factor or nerve growth factor. So at least for brain-derived neurotropic factor, we've got that covered in case we want to combine cerebrolysin with a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor, and thus might get a substantial beneficial effect from the dose of cerebrolysin that we decide to go with. So here's a comprehensive list of growth factors and neurotropic factors, which are broken down by the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes. It breaks down angiopoietin, ciliary neurotropic factor, epidermal growth factor, erythropoietin, albeit that if you go through all of the inserts of dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, they're not known to increase hematocrit and overall red blood cell counts. Dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes break down fibroblast growth factor 1 to 23, glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, aka gastric inhibitory polypeptide, abbreviated to GIP, and glucagon-like peptide 1, abbreviated to GLP-1. It breaks down growth hormone releasing hormone. So if you take a DPP-4 inhibitor, you see that growth hormone levels in serum tend to go up, and then downstream insulin growth factor 1 levels go up. And then by taking an inhibitor, you prevent the breakdown of IGF-1, making it go up more, increasing overall insulin sensitivity and improving glucose homeostasis well beyond the inhibition of the breakdown of GIP and GLP-1. So again, these medications are quite powerful, and the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes break down hepatocyte growth factor, insulin growth factor 1 and 2, like I mentioned earlier, mechano growth factor, myostatin, brain-derived neurotropic factor, nerve growth factor, thrombopoietin, and vascular endothelial growth factor. So based on basic human biology, by taking an inhibitor, you might prevent the breakdown of either of these growth factors and neurotropic factors. Here are all the FDA-approved dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors and their medically recognized dosing protocol to manage type 2 diabetes. The details are on the screen. We don't need to mention all of that. What I would like to mention is that linagliptin and sitagliptin are often combined with sodium glucose cotransporter type 2 inhibitors. So you might want to read the package insert before you start trying either sitagliptin or linagliptin, which might be combined with an SGLT2, and thus serum glucose and serum sodium levels tend to go down quite dramatically, but that results in better glucose homeostasis. But we're taking these to prevent the breakdown of brain-derived neurotropic factor, which might be heightened by taking cerebrolysin and thus get a synergistic effect. Now, these various dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors have various dosing protocols, administration frequencies, half-lives, and active lives, so please do additional research if you decide to go with the dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor alongside your cerebrolysin protocol. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an established half-life or active life of cerebrolysin. This study shows that electrical activity of the brain revolving around short-term memory increased 15 minutes after cerebrolysin administration, peaked around 2 hours, and lasted until 8 hours after administration. But again, this is an animal model, and these results might not translate into humans. And this is the only scientific evidence that we have regarding the duration of action of cerebrolysin. Cerebrolysin's neurotropic activity can be detected in the bloodstream for up to 24 hours after a single administration. This suggests that the peptide fragments of cerebrolysin remain biologically active for at least 1 day. And this is further confirmed by the dosing protocols which are used medically with daily or at least 5 times weekly administrations. Sitagliptin, aka Januvia, seems to be the most promising dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor regarding its beneficial effects by increasing brain-derived neurotropic factor, vascular endothelial growth factor, and insulin-like growth factor in serum as well as in the brain potentially. Sitagliptin has a half-life of approximately 8 to 14 hours, which seems to overlap with the active life of cerebrolysin, and sitagliptin is readily available. So out of all of these dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, if you have to choose one, I would go with sitagliptin. Now, personally, I always get a little bit sleepy when I administer cerebrolysin, whether that's 5 milliliters or 10 milliliters in a single intramuscular administration. So I would always inject my cerebrolysin about 2 hours before bed. I've gone up to 5 milliliters to 10 milliliters cerebrolysin for a total course duration of 2 months with daily injections. And for the large majority of that treatment course, I combined cerebrolysin with 100 milligrams sitagliptin before bed. Now, I have a firm grasp on my blood glucose levels because, again, dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors might modulate your blood glucose levels, and I have a firm grasp on my appetite, so I make sure that I don't miss any meals, even if my appetite is suppressed, allowing my blood glucose levels to stay in range while I'm sleeping. But I felt that throughout those 2 months of daily 5 milliliters to 10 milliliters cerebrolysin administrations, in combination with daily use of 100 milligrams sitagliptin all before bed, that I got a more pronounced effect compared to previous cycles of 5 milliliters to 10 milliliters cerebrolysin for up to 1 month. So again, the scientific evidence isn't very conclusive. There's no direct scientific evidence combining cerebrolysin with a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor, but with an anecdotal experience of one, I would say that it works. The beneficial effects that I got on my mood and cognition seem to be more pronounced. The beneficial effects that I got on my sleep quality seem to be more pronounced. And the long-lasting nootropic benefits regarding my productivity, motivation, that kind of stuff are also way more pronounced from the combination of cerebrolysin with sitagliptin, even though I discontinued both months ago. Needless to say, based on the anecdotal experience of one, I'm highly in favor of this combination of cerebrolysin and a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor, albeit that I don't know anybody who's tried this particular biohacking optimization themselves. I asked the longevity fanatic Brian Johnson about this when he called in during the Enhanced Games seminar back in December 2024, but it seemed he was not aware of this potential drug interaction. And he also specifically mentioned that his cerebrolysin experience was hard to quantify, which is something I agree with, but I will get into that a little bit later on in this video. I'll be sure to send Brian Johnson this cerebrolysin deep dive to see if he has something to say and maybe give a little bit more explanation about his personal cerebrolysin experience. Okay, let's proceed into the Mother Russia approved medical applications of cerebrolysin, which varies slightly between the dosing guidelines and the product information found on the official cerebrolysin website. I've linked both documents down below in the YouTube description section. For your information though, cerebrolysin is not FDA approved in the United States, but it is available here in Thailand on prescription. Gen Oracle, the compounding pharmacy that I work with, if you sign up as a patient, you can have cerebrolysin prescribed if you suffer from the following medical conditions. Cerebrolysin is prescribed in Mother Russia for ischemic stroke or hemorrhagic stroke in dosages between 20 milliliters to 50 milliliters daily for 10 to 21 days consecutively. It's prescribed in cases of traumatic brain injury between 20 milliliters to 50 milliliters daily for 7 days to 30 days consecutively. It's used in the treatment of vascular dementia at 10 milliliters to 30 milliliters cerebrolysin 5 times weekly for 4 weeks in duration for a total of 2 to 4 cycles yearly. So that could be 4 weeks every 6 months or 4 weeks every quarter. And cerebrolysin is used for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease as well, in which case the dosing protocol is exactly the same as for vascular dementia, 10 milliliters to 30 milliliters cerebrolysin 5 times weekly for 4 weeks, repeated for 2 to 4 cycles yearly. Now, in all of these medical scenarios, whether that's stroke, traumatic brain injury, vascular dementia, or Alzheimer's disease, it's suggested to initiate cerebrolysin treatment as soon as possible. And when you go through all of the scientific evidence, you see that in many cases, they start cerebrolysin, at least in the case of stroke and traumatic brain injury, within 1 to 4 hours after they arrive in the hospital. Now, obviously, vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease that occurs over time. Still, when that's diagnosed, they apply cerebrolysin as fast as possible, which seems to help with the treatment outcome and the resolvement of this particular medical condition as fast as possible as well. Now we compare this to the approved medical applications found in the product information. You see that the dosages are a little bit lower. So in case of acute stroke or post-stroke, whether it's ischemic stroke or hemorrhagic stroke, the dose can start at 10 milliliters cerebrolysin versus 20 milliliters cerebrolysin found in the dosing guidelines. And it's the same for traumatic brain injury. 10 milliliters cerebrolysin is the starting dose compared to 20 milliliters as the starting dose found in the dosing guidelines. The top dosage range is 50 milliliters in all contexts. And when it comes to vascular dementia or Alzheimer's disease, in the product information, they say that you could start with 5 milliliters cerebrolysin 5 times weekly for 4 weeks consecutively for 2 to 4 cycles out of the year. But again, in the dosing guidelines, they mention that you should start with 10 milliliters cerebrolysin for vascular dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Long story short, the dosing guidelines are twice as high at the starting dose compared to the product information found on the official cerebrolysin website, but the top end of the range for all of these conditions are still 50 milliliters or 30 milliliters, right? So do a little bit of research if you suffer from any of these medical conditions and you live in Mother Russia, where you can get cerebrolysin prescribed. And here are the guidelines of the various routes of administrations of cerebrolysin. If you go with an intramuscular injection, you can go up to 5 milliliters cerebrolysin per injection site, slowly administered over the course of 3 minutes. Now I'm going to have to interject here a little bit. Yes, I've gone up to 5 milliliters cerebrolysin per injection site. So if I wanted to take 10 milliliters cerebrolysin post leg day, I would split that up bilaterally. So let's say 5 milliliters cerebrolysin into the left cheek and 5 milliliters cerebrolysin into the right cheek. but I would inject that a lot faster because it's water-based, and it would literally go in like butter over the course of 30 seconds. And I had 0 post-injection pain, so I think you can do intramuscular administrations a little bit faster than they would recommend on the website. If you go with intravenous injections, you can go up to 10 milliliters administered over the course of 3 minutes. This is considered to be a slow push intravenous injection straight from the syringe. I've never done this myself. I've always stuck with intravenous infusions if I go up to a very high dose of cerebrolysin, but I've only done that a couple times because I get perfectly good beneficial effects from 5 milliliters to 10 milliliters daily over the course of 2 months consecutively. But we'll get into the dosing protocols a little bit later on. So if you go with intravenous infusion for a higher dose of cerebrolysin, at let's say 10 milliliters to 50 milliliters cerebrolysin diluted in at least 100 milliliters normal saline solution, or 100 milliliters Ringer solution, or 100 milliliters 5% glucose solution, then you can infuse this intravenously over the course of 15 minutes to 60 minutes, aka 1 hour. Now, from personal experience, if you go up to 50 milliliters cerebrolysin, I would rather have you dilute that into a 500 milliliters normal saline solution so you can have a slow drip nice and steadily, and usually 500 milliliters normal saline solution would be absorbed over the course of 60 minutes. Okay, let's move over to the evidence-based unique characteristics of cerebrolysin and see what kind of beneficial effects we can extrapolate from the scientific evidence. And I can't believe it took over 30 minutes to get to the evidence-based unique characteristics of cerebrolysin. It's probably a new record, but I had to get the composition of cerebrolysin out of the way first, so you guys understand that all of these unique characteristics are actually stemming from the peptide fragments or the free amino acids which are contained within cerebrolysin, even though cerebrolysin doesn't contain any neurotropic factors itself. I've included the dosage ranges and administration protocols where all of these beneficial effects are observed, so you can make a decision for yourself and know what you need to aim for if you want to get a comparable effect. I took the liberty to extrapolate the human equivalent dose from the animal models wherever applicable, so you have an estimated dosage or dosage range for each unique characteristic. And for your information, most of the animal models use intraperitoneal administration straight into the abdomen, so I replaced intraperitoneal administration for intramuscular administrations. I feel that that's reasonably comparable regarding the mechanism of action, because that's not going systemic right away, but has to diffuse from the injection depot, whether that's intraperitoneally or intramuscularly, for example. You're welcome. Like I mentioned earlier at the start of this video, cerebrolysin modulates the expression of endogenous neurotropic factors stemming from human subjects, animal models, and in vitro studies. Cerebrolysin increases brain-derived neurotropic factor, nerve growth factor, insulin-like growth factor 1, vascular endothelial growth factor expression. Cerebrolysin potentiates glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, ciliary neurotropic factor, and insulin-like growth factor 1 like effects, and it lowers tumor necrosis factor alpha expression in the brain. And this is observed at 10 milliliters to 60 milliliters intramuscularly or through intravenous infusions 5 times weekly, or 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight intramuscularly daily. Cerebrolysin targets caspase-3 T lymphocytes and mitogen-activated protein kinase pathways, again stemming from human subjects, animal models, and in vitro studies. Cerebrolysin is involved in programmed cell death, aka apoptosis, cellular stimuli responses to heat shock, osmotic stress, and pro-inflammatory cytokines, including tumor necrosis factor alpha. And cerebrolysin is part of the signaling pathway that regulates cell growth, differentiation, and apoptosis. And again, the dosing protocol where this is observed is exactly the same as where cerebrolysin modulates the expression of endogenous neurotropic factors. Cerebrolysin induces neurofilament L polypeptide expression stemming from in vitro studies, which should contribute to neuronal differentiation. Cerebrolysin protects against oxidative stress-induced apoptosis in lymphocytes, aka white blood cells, stemming from an in vitro study, which could offer potential neurodegenerative protective effects. Cerebrolysin offers potential neuroprotective effects in stroke, traumatic brain injury, and Alzheimer's disease, albeit that the scientific evidence is not super conclusive. Cerebrolysin modulates endogenous neurotropic factors, like I alluded to earlier, and reduces neuroinflammation in the brain. This is observed at 5 milliliters to 30 milliliters intravenous infusions, 5 times weekly to daily for 4 weeks, for a total of 2 to 4 cycles yearly. You can find a lot of literature review down below regarding stroke, traumatic brain injury, and Alzheimer's disease, where some of the evidence is not super conclusive in these particular medical conditions, but I'll leave it up to you to give all of that a read in case you suffer from stroke, traumatic brain injury, or Alzheimer's disease yourself. And if you don't want to do that, here's a summary of all of that scientific evidence bundled together. Just leave me a like and a comment to show some love right back at me. Cerebrolysin might improve long-term rehabilitation after ischemic stroke, stemming from human subjects, with inconclusive evidence compared to placebo groups, more effective when combined with neurorehabilitation. This was observed after or concluded with dosages ranging from 30 milliliters to 50 milliliters cerebrolysin with intravenous infusions daily for 10 to 21 days consecutively, sometimes combined with 100 milligrams aspirin daily as adjuvant therapy. Cerebrolysin might offer preventative therapy and improve cognition in elderly patients with vascular dementia, stemming from human subjects, obviously. Cerebrolysin slows the progression of cognitive deficits and lowers the conversion rate to dementia after amnestic mild cognitive impairment diagnosis. So if you administer 20 milliliters cerebrolysin through intravenous infusion daily for 28 days, repeated annually for 3 years consecutively, then it might prevent the progression from this amnestic mild cognitive impairment diagnosis to full-blown vascular dementia. Looks very promising based on scientific evidence. Cerebrolysin improves recovery and cognition, and cerebrolysin relieves symptoms of depression but not anxiety following moderate to severe traumatic brain injury stemming from human subjects. In which case, the dose of cerebrolysin is either 50 milliliters by intravenous infusions daily for 5 to 10 days, or in cases of severe depression that's longer lasting, or severe traumatic brain injury that needs a longer period to be resolved, the dose of cerebrolysin is between 10 milliliters to 50 milliliters by intravenous infusions daily for 10 days to over 20 months. So severe long-lasting depression or severe traumatic brain injury, or both, 50 milliliters cerebrolysin intravenous infusion daily for over 20 months until both conditions are resolved. And this one is a little bit speculatory. Cerebrolysin improves symptoms of chronic sleep deprivation in traumatic brain injury and Alzheimer's disease, stemming from human subjects and animal models. Cerebrolysin offers potential neuroprotective effects, prevents sleep deprivation-induced memory impairment, and prevents oxidative stress in the hippocampus. From the human equivalent dose, that's 0.4 milliliters to 5 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight through intramuscular injection or intravenous infusion in a single administration. Keep in mind that most of the studies showing an improvement in chronic sleep deprivation were performed by Hari Shankar Sharma, who's had several of his studies retracted. You can read more about his dubious contributions to the scientific community in the article titled Cerebrolysin, Sharma's Maslia, and Ever Pharma, which is linked down below. So you might want to take this scientific evidence with a healthy and hefty dose of Himalaya pink salt. But it's all up and onwards from here. Cerebrolysin prevents short and long-term memory impairment during post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from an animal model using rats, where cerebrolysin was shown to reduce PTSD-induced oxidative stress in the hippocampus at the dose, which is very comparable to the previous dosage ranges we discussed when extrapolating from the animal models, 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight intramuscularly or by intravenous infusions, 6 times weekly in this case, for 4 weeks consecutively. And this one is pretty interesting. Cerebrolysin might offer a potential treatment of post-fluorona C19 persistent anosmia, which is taste, flavor, and sensory loss in human subjects. Cerebrolysin offers a 61.5% recovery rate of olfactory, gustatory, and trigeminal chemosensory dysfunction at 5 milliliters cerebrolysin intramuscularly 5 times weekly for 8 to 24 weeks with 25,000 IUs vitamin A daily as adjuvant therapy. So if that sounds interesting to you and you just watched the methylene blue deep dive, a combination of cerebrolysin and methylene blue at the investigated dosage ranges, which again are quite high, I will tell you that, At these quite high dosage ranges, cerebrolysin and methylene blue, perhaps in combination, might offer you some relief. Cerebrolysin might improve cognition and symptoms of type 1 diabetes and type 3 diabetes, which is often associated with Alzheimer's disease. This is stemming from an animal model using rats. Cerebrolysin was shown to offer a 19.4% reduction of serum glucose and a 14.4% reduction of serum hemoglobin A1C levels. And again, at the aforementioned dose of 0.4 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight. And this one is pretty interesting for all of you party people out there. You know who you are. Cerebrolysin by intranasal administration improves spatial and recognition memory, synapse plasticity, and increases antioxidant capacity at only 40%, yes, just 40%, the dose of interperitoneal administration in ischemic stroke and senescence. So why don't we take cerebrolysin intranasally instead of injecting it basically the day after you go out for a hefty party session, right? You're already on the road. Might as well continue with that practice of what you were doing. Cerebrolysin directly enters the nasal cavity and passes the blood-brain barrier based on the molecular weight of the peptide fragments and the free-form amino acids. At 0.08 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight, intranasally daily for 8 weeks. These studies show that 1 milliliter cerebrolysin per 1 kilogram of body weight by intranasal administration, again, this is the animal dose, we converted that to the human equivalent dose already, was just as effective as 2.5 milliliter cerebrolysin per 1 kilogram of body weight by interperitoneal administration, which is just 40% of the dose comparatively, aka 2.5 times more effective. And again, that's probably because the peptide fragments and free amino acids of cerebrolysin can freely enter the nasal cavity and pass the blood-brain barrier into the brain directly, similar to how Salank or Samax enter the brain. Now, for your information, 0.8 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder is 8 milliliters cerebrolysin intranasally, which is excessive. And most nasal sprays contain about 15 milliliters of liquid. So you could always dump 3 ampules of 5 milliliters cerebrolysin into a cookie cutter nasal spray that you can buy online, and then go through that nasal spray in 2 days. 7.5 milliliters cerebrolysin straight up the nose every single day. And then you'll finish that bottle in 2 or maybe 3 days if you stick with 5 milliliters. And to further drive that point home for you guys, on average, a nasal spray delivers about 0.1 milliliters per pump, 0.1 milliliters per spray. So you get about 21.52 milligrams cerebrolysin peptide fragments and free amino acids per serving. But that also means you need to administer 80 pumps, 80 sprays, 80 sprays per day to get your 8 milliliters in if you're a 100 kilogram bodybuilder. So that basically means you need to bump every 12 minutes. Yeah, and I'm sure that sounds familiar to you guys. It sounds familiar to me, but that part of my life is long behind me. There are some instances of minor to severe allergic reactions to cerebrolysin, known as a porcine allergy, which partially stem from an immunoglobulin E-mediated response. But these adverse effects are mostly observed when cerebrolysin is administered intravenously. So religious reasoning aside, if you know you have an allergy to pork meat or gelatin products for that matter, then I would avoid cerebrolysin altogether and skip to the part where I discuss Cortexin as a replacement. Before you do any kind of intravenous or intramuscular cerebrolysin administration, please go with the conservative route and inject 0.1 milliliters cerebrolysin subcutaneously to assess your response if you get post-injection pain, redness at the site of administration, or you get some sort of an indication of anaphylactic shock. That obviously means that an intramuscular or intravenous cerebrolysin administration is not for you. And please be patient. Please give yourself at least 24 hours for any kind of negative effect to manifest. If after 1 or 2 days you don't get any post-injection pain, irritation at the site of administration, or other kinds of complications following the 0.1 milliliters cerebrolysin subcutaneous injection, then you can proceed to 0.1 to 1 milliliter cerebrolysin by intramuscular injection to assess for a similar response, right? Post-injection pain, irritation at the site of administration, or redness, or anaphylactic shock. Again, it could still occur, switching from subcutaneous or intramuscular administration if you suffer from a porcine allergy. So take it slow, take it step by step, and assess day by day or with 2-day breaks in between if you have an allergic response to your cerebrolysin injections before you do anything intravenously. And if you do go intravenously on your first shot, go with a 1 milliliter cerebrolysin administration over a 5-minute injection intravenously to see if you have any kind of negative effect. Because if you go halfway through your injection over 2.5 minutes of 0.5 milliliters, and then you start to get symptoms of anaphylactic shock, then at least you're halfway there and you can abort and ride it out if and only if you have an EpiPen on standby. You might need a hefty dose of epinephrine, aka adrenaline, to get you out of this adverse reaction as fast as possible. If you go with intravenous injections, please guys, please use either a butterfly catheter needle or a silicone catheter to prevent any kind of arterial damage and scarring. Assuming you don't get an autoimmune response from 1 milliliter cerebrolysin intravenously, then you can proceed to the dose that you're after, dilute it into at least 100 milliliters normal saline solution and administered over the course of 15 minutes to 60 minutes. And again, if you go with a higher dose of cerebrolysin, let's say 50 milliliters intravenously, please dilute that into a 500 milliliter normal saline solution concoction, and then take your sweet time and administer that intravenously with a silicone catheter. And before I forget, Benadryl and Zantac might be able to prevent any development of immunoglobulin E antigens. These can be used preventatively before each intravenous cerebrolysin infusion. And with that out of the way, let's get into whether cerebrolysin treatments can cause Prion disease or not. Prions are infectious proteins which can cause fatal neurodegenerative complications known as Prion disease. Prions can be transmitted through the contact of infected tissues, contaminated medical equipment, even by eating infected meat or by injecting animal-based peptide extracts. Prions cause disease by converting normal cellular prion proteins into the abnormal infectious form. This misfolded protein then aggregates and damages brain tissue, leading to symptoms like memory loss, personality changes, and movement problems. Now, I don't consider jazz hands to be movement problems, but I'm sure you guys will let me know down below in the comment section whether I have Prion disease or not. These diseases, also called transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, include Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease in humans, bovine spongiform encephalopathy or mad cow's disease in cattle, and scrapie in sheep. There's no scientific evidence that cerebrolysin is associated with Prion disease. If there was some sort of cover-up within Mother Russia and other countries where cerebrolysin is FDA approved for particular medical treatments, at one point or another, after decades and decades and decades of cerebrolysin administrations in human patients, you would figure that an instance of Prion disease would come to the forefront at one point in time or another, but I couldn't find any indication that cerebrolysin contains prions in the 2 studies which investigated the peptide fragments and the free amino acids which are contained within cerebrolysin. So I hope that put your mind at ease somewhat. That being said though, any product derived from animal tissues contain a theoretical risk of contributing to Prion disease if it's not properly processed to eliminate these infectious proteins. And for your information, you can also get prions from human cadaver pituitary extracted growth hormone formulations, which didn't seem to stop the bodybuilders from using it up until the mid-1980s. And before we get into the cerebrolysin dosing protocols, let's briefly compare the efficacy of cerebrolysin to the efficacy of Cortexin, which is a complex of low molecular weight water-soluble polypeptide fragments derived from the cerebral cortex of calves. Unfortunately, the large majority of the studies comparing cerebrolysin to Cortexin are in Russian and not available as a full publication. Wherever possible, I extrapolated some information from the abstract, translating Russian into English, but there might be some conjecture here due to the lack of fully translated publications. Still, I did my absolute best to group and aggregate all of the information I could find comparing cerebrolysin to Cortexin. So here we go. The investigated dosage ranges from animal models using mice with cerebrolysin that was 0.8 milliliters, 2.5 milliliters, or 7.5 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight daily for 2 10-day courses with a 10-day treatment break in between those 2 10-day courses, or daily for up to 4 weeks in duration. And in these studies, the investigated dosage ranges for Cortexin were 0.3 milligrams, 1 milligram, or 3 milligrams per 1 kilogram of body weight daily for the exact same treatment duration. And it's only fair if you compare cerebrolysin to Cortexin with the exact same treatment protocols. And the investigated dosage ranges using rats as an animal model are basically 1-on-1. So the exact same dose between cerebrolysin and Cortexin. So there was either 1 microgram, 10 micrograms, or 100 micrograms milligrams cerebrolysin or Cortexin administered through intraventricular infusion, which is an injection directly into the brain's fluid-filled ventriculars, also known as an intracerebroventricular administration. And converting that to the human equivalent dose using DoseCal, which is always linked down below in case you want to do your own conversions. The human equivalent dose of cerebrolysin will be between 0.06 milliliters to 0.61 milliliters per 1 kilogram of body weight. And for Cortexin, that will be 0.02 milligrams to 0.24 milligrams per 1 kilogram of body weight in both instances daily. So again, that would mean a 100 kilogram bodybuilder would have to take up to 61 milliliters cerebrolysin or go up to 24 milligrams Cortexin based on these animal models where the maximum efficacious effects were generally observed at the higher dosage ranges. The mechanism of action. For cerebrolysin, it crosses the blood-brain barrier with an unknown uptake and offers neurotropic-like effects. And with Cortexin, it also crosses the blood-brain barrier with a 6 to 8% uptake. It acts on AMPA, kainate, mGLUR1, GABA-A1, and mGLUR5 receptors. And Cortexin offers glutamatergic and GABAergic modulation. Now, comparing the beneficial effects regarding neurological recovery and memory formation, with cerebrolysin, it offers superior improvement after embolic stroke and comparable improvements after acute and ischemic stroke or chronic ischemia. And with Cortexin, again, it offers comparable improvements after acute ischemic stroke and chronic ischemia. So in this context, for embolic stroke, cerebrolysin seems to be superior. When comparing lesion volume reduction, cerebrolysin offered no significant reduction in lesion volume, but Cortexin reduced necrotic tissue size. When comparing cerebral blood flow, either compound, whether it was cerebrolysin or Cortexin, had no effect on cerebral blood flow whatsoever. Regarding antioxidant activity, cerebrolysin has a dose-dependent antioxidant effect, but Cortexin has a superior dose-dependent antioxidant effect. Regarding cytoprotective effects, comparing cerebrolysin to Cortexin, cerebrolysin exhibits cytoprotective properties on T and B lymphocytes, favors survival of immunocompetent cells, and stimulates immune memory B lymphocyte proliferation. But Cortexin was shown to have cytotoxic and anti-proliferative effects on T lymphocytes. So regarding cytoprotective effects and the effects on the immune system, cerebrolysin wins. And regarding behavioral effects, cerebrolysin was shown to have moderate psychostimulant action, but Cortexin has more effective psychostimulant action. The adverse effects are minimal regarding the differences in safety profile, but since both compounds are derived from animal tissue, both compounds could potentially contribute to Prion's disease, albeit again in both instances, whether that's cerebrolysin or Cortexin, no scientific evidence that these compounds are associated with Prion's disease. And when we're comparing the therapeutic effects from price to dose, it seems that cerebrolysin is less efficacious after ischemic stroke, whereas Cortexin is more efficacious after ischemic stroke. So regarding the outcome of the study, Cortexin is more beneficial when you compare that to the cost. However, this is coming from a Russian study stemming from 2006, so that's almost 20 years ago, and the full publication isn't available. So here's the too long didn't read. Cerebrolysin is superior to resolve stroke and has a positive effect on the immune system, while Cortexin has superior antioxidant effects, reduces necrotic tissue, and is more effective in psychostimulation and might be a little bit more cost effective when we're comparing prices. Using some highly dubious extrapolation from these studies where the results of cerebrolysin treatment are very comparable to the results of Cortexin treatment, I have to conclude that 10 milligrams lyophilized Cortexin equals about 25 milliliters of liquid cerebrolysin. And that being said, after 60 days, yes, 60 days consecutively, either 5 milliliters to 10 milliliters cerebrolysin intramuscularly before bed daily, I did not notice any beneficial effect switching from up to 10 milliliters cerebrolysin to 10 milligrams Cortexin intramuscularly before bed for another 20 days after this initial 60-day cerebrolysin treatment, which you could consider to be 2.5 to 5 times the dose of cerebrolysin I was running before, right? Up to 10 milliliters cerebrolysin is still 2.5 times lower than the 10 milligrams Cortexin dose I would take daily for 20 days afterwards. I did not notice a beneficial effect on top of the beneficial effects I experienced from 60 days on Cerebrolysin by continuing and switching to Cortexin for another 20 days. Now, this is, again, an N of 1 anecdotal experience. I would not know if I would have started with Cortexin if the beneficial effects would have manifested on a 2.5 milligram to 5 milligram Cortexin dose. I guess I'll never know, because the next time I'll run Cerebrolysin or Cortexin, we're talking about a couple years ahead, because I feel that these courses have very long-lasting effects. So based on this ratio, which I got from the scientific evidence, where 10 milligrams Cortexin being around $9.50 and 25 milliliters Cerebrolysin being around $70, excluding discounts and shipping fees, I would have to agree with the 2006 study where Cortexin has a more favorable dose-to-price ratio, albeit that I can't vouch for its efficacy because, again, I did not notice anything after the initial 60 days on Cerebrolysin. Now, I'm sure you guys will let me know down below in the comment section that you would like to see a Cortexin deep dive in the near future, right after I finish a boatload of other deep dives, which are currently pending. So if you want to speed up that process, give me a little bit of incentive, share this Cerebrolysin deep dive video with all of your nootropic loving friends, bring the views up by putting a boatload of comments, a couple likes, and sharing this all across the internet. And then I feel a little bit more incentivized to get started on the Cortexin deep dive, so you guys know exactly what to expect in case you don't want to run Cerebrolysin after watching this deep dive, or through religious reasons or Brown's disease, you're a little bit turned off of the idea of injecting purified pig brains. And that finally brings us to the dosing protocols. Everybody rejoice. For men, I would say that the sustainable and tolerable dose, based on the scientific evidence and my personal experience, and talking to a lot of people who have used Cerebrolysin over the last couple of years, the dose is anywhere between 2.5 milliliters to 60 milliliters, either by intramuscular administration or intravenous infusion, 5 times weekly to daily for up to 2 months. And the deleterious dose, well, since it's never been investigated and the safety profile regarding the scientific evidence, it seems that it's generally well tolerated, besides a couple instances of allergic reactions. The deleterious dose might be over 60 milliliters intramuscularly or intravenous, 5 times weekly to daily for over 2 months. And for women, the dosing protocol is pretty much the same, albeit that I would still recommend women to use a lower dose of Cerebrolysin, simply because their body weight is usually lower than men, unless you're a porky, and then, well, I guess there's an applicable joke in there somewhere. You can combine Cerebrolysin either with 5 milligrams donazepam or 500 milligrams citicoline, aka CDP choline, or 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams Januvia to get a more pronounced effect. And if you don't like to go with donazepam or citicoline, then you can obviously use alpha-GPC. It's just about increasing acetylcholine levels in the brain. And based on the scientific evidence, I would say that alpha-GPC is a little bit more potent to increase acetylcholine levels than citicoline. Now, speaking for myself, even though that's not the case for everybody, some people notice that they get an energetic effect from Cerebrolysin. So you have to do some self-experimentation when you start with Cerebrolysin treatments, self-prescribed. Cerebrolysin also always made me very, very, very sleepy. So I would take either 5 milliliters or 10 milliliters split bilaterally over 2 5 milliliter servings intramuscularly, let's say 1 to 2 hours before bed, sometimes in combination with a 2 IU to 10 IU growth hormone administration, which would really improve my sleep quality. I mean, Cerebrolysin and growth hormone before bed, sleep like a baby. Honestly, it's the best sleep stack, even though it's reasonably expensive, the best sleep stack I've ever tried, and I've tried all of them. And I would combine the Cerebrolysin administration with 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams Januvia, aka sitagliptin, at the same time to potentiate the effects a little bit higher by preventing the breakdown of various neurotropic factors. Again, I have a firm grasp on my blood glucose levels, my hemoglobin A1C levels, my fasting insulin levels, and everything else that you need to pay extra special attention to when you start modulating your blood glucose levels with a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor. So make sure you have a glucometer or a Dexcom or another continuous blood glucose monitor available when you start combining a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor with Cerebrolysin before bed, because the last thing that you want is to wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning with severe symptoms of hypoglycemia, forcing you to slam an entire bottle of Gatorade or perhaps some bacon you found in the fridge downstairs. And there might be some potential drug interactions regarding Brown's disease when you combine bacon with Cerebrolysin. I've never combined cerebrolysin with donazepam or CDP choline or alpha GPC for that matter, because again, I always took it before bed, and increasing my acetylcholine levels in the brain before bed usually keeps me awake, and otherwise it makes me dream quite unfavorably, I would say. So whether this combination between donazepam, CDP-choline, or alpha-GPC actually improves regarding an improvement of cognition, I'm not entirely sure. I've never tried it myself. But if you've tried it, let us know down below in the comment section whether you combine cerebrolysin with a method to increase acetylcholine levels in the brain, or cerebrolysin with another neurotropic factor, secretagogue like Semax or Slank. Again, I've never done that, but I know people who did that themselves. Let us know down below in the comment section. I would love to hear about it, and I'm sure everybody else would love to hear about it as well. Personally, I would limit intramuscular injections to 5 milliliters per administration site. So if you go with 10 milliliters like I used to do, 5 milliliters on the left side and the right side, split bilaterally, and it kind of depends on how big your glutes, your lats, or quads are for them to hold up to 5 milliliters of liquid per injection depot. Intramuscular injections are, for lack of better explanation, smooth as butter. I've done hundreds upon hundreds of cerebrolysin administrations over the years, and not once, not a single instances of redness, post-injection pain, or injection site irritation in any way, shape, or form. This is probably the smoothest injection I've ever done in my life, and I honestly wish that steroids or any kind of other peptide formulation would give me such a smooth injection experience as cerebrolysin does. But so far, nothing comes close. And beyond a 10 milliliter cerebrolysin administration, you would need to dilute the cerebrolysin into at least 100 milliliters normal saline solution, but preferably 500 milliliters normal saline solution, and then administer that intravenously over the duration of 15 to 60 minutes. A nice slow drip, so you have adequate time to absorb all of that cerebrolysin into the brain tissue, and then preferably use a catheter needle, whether that's a butterfly catheter needle or a silicone catheter, to prevent any kind of arterial damage and scarring, especially if you administer cerebrolysin intravenously daily. What I noticed the most from cerebrolysin administrations between 5 milliliters to 10 milliliters after, let's say, 1 to 2 weeks of daily continuous use is that I'm calmer, I'm more composed, I'm a little bit more relaxed. I feel that I respond less stressfully to particular situations, whether that's a work stress or relationship stress, which is basically non-existent because I'm happily married, or a stress related to the cryptocurrency where I have financial funds invested, and then sometimes the market dips by 20%, and then normally you would panic and start panic selling. But on cerebrolysin, or SSRIs for that matter, I'm a little bit more composed, and I make much better financial decisions regarding the assets that I have to manage on a day-to-day basis. So that's personally what I notice. Besides that, when I was still training balls to the wall and super insane on 10 milliliters cerebrolysin, it seemed to mitigate the post-exercise brain fog following leg days or back days almost entirely the next day, which also came with a problematic side effect, is that I started training harder. So I knew that a certain amount of volume, I would be able to get away with it. Then I could increase the volume by taking 10 milliliters cerebrolysin before bed after a leg day or a back day. So I increased the volume by, let's say, 3 to 4 working sets to failure or beyond failure using a spotter. And then the next day I would be completely composed, and I was like, maybe I can go 8 sets extra. Right, so I gained a significant amount of size during the time I was running cerebrolysin to mitigate the brain fog, because the next day I would still be highly productive. So work didn't suffer as long as I was using cerebrolysin before bed after these strenuous workouts. And then when I took the cerebrolysin off, oh man, I was brain fogged for days. Yeah, so I really had to reduce the volume on those strenuous leg days and kept a couple sets from failure, just to make sure that I wouldn't have terrible brain fog the next day, and which is normal for me otherwise with this level of training intensity, because otherwise my productivity would have been in the gutter and I wouldn't be able to make these very lengthy and informative deep dives for you guys. So even though I discontinued the cerebrolysin a couple months ago, I think it's been, 4 months already. Sorry, it took so long to make this deep dive. It's been 4 months since my last cerebrolysin injection, and let's say about 3 months since the last Cortexin administration. I dropped my training volume down to the point I have a little bit of brain fog the next day, but it doesn't impair my work. but that intensity is still higher than the training intensity that I had previously, where Cerebrolysin was never used. So it seems that after a 60-day course on Cerebrolysin, regarding my mood, my productivity, my sense of well-being, my reduction in post-exercise brain fog the next day, my improvement in sleep quality is still longer lasting, even though I discontinued Cerebrolysin, let's say 3 to 4 months ago. But some of these effects might be stemming from fluvoxamine, which is known to increase brain-derived neurotropic factor. So while I was running a brain-derived neurotropic factor secretagogue, for a better lack of a sense of explanation, I'm still elevating my brain-derived neurotropic factor with 50 milligrams fluvoxamine before bed. So that might potentiate the effects that I got from Cerebrolysin for months in duration. For me personally, I think one course of Cerebrolysin, and maybe this is the case for you as well, one course of Cerebrolysin per year, whether that's 5 milliliters daily for 30 days or 5 to 10 milliliters daily for up to 60 days, I think that's enough to get long-lasting effects. Again, there might be some overlap with the other neurotropic factor secretagogues that I'm taking, but I feel that the beneficial effects are quite long-lasting. And then when I feel that these effects are diminishing, I feel a reduction in mood, cognition, productivity, post-exercise brain fog is through the roof, or I'm making terrible cryptocurrency decisions, then I think it's time for another Cerebrolysin course. And then I might combine that with donazepam or another method to increase acetylcholine levels in the brain. But then I would have to switch to morning administrations. And if that makes me incredibly sleepy, then obviously that protocol is not going to work. And I'm going to switch to the previous protocol of Cerebrolysin growth hormone and sitagliptin before bed. Now, before we close off this video, I just want to highlight 2 articles which I found online which questioned the efficacy and overall legitimacy of Cerebrolysin, since it isn't very clear what Cerebrolysin actually contains, which we highlighted at the start of this video. You can read about that in the article, What the Hell is Cerebrolysin Actually? It's linked down below. And another article titled Cerebrolysin, Sharma's, Muslia, and Ever Pharma, which I highlighted earlier, goes over the unethical practices of duplication among various Cerebrolysin studies performed by a select few individuals who clearly have financial interest in making Cerebrolysin seem like a magical compound that can cure all kinds of medical conditions. All of the studies which were highlighted in that article, I excluded from this Cerebrolysin deep dive unless there was some overlap with other studies, which wasn't mentioned in this article, showing a similar efficacious outcome. So some of the studies might still be linked down below in the description or comment section where all of the citations are. I would highly suggest you to read both of these articles, whether that's the What the Hell is Cerebrolysin Actually or Cerebrolysin, Sharma's, Muslia, and Ever Pharma article. Before we get into the Cerebrolysin addendum live stream, I will give it another read again, so we have a little bit of a discussion point. I would also highly suggest you to give both of these articles a read before you purchase Cerebrolysin for yourself, if this Cerebrolysin deep dive somehow convince you to use Cerebrolysin. Because again, the scientific evidence is not super conclusive. The ingredients of Cerebrolysin are not 100% known, or what these peptide fragments actually do, even though scientifically it's been shown to increase various neurotropic factor levels in the brain, whether that's in human subjects, proven with serum concentrations, or animal models using actual brain tissue to confirm that various neurotropic factors are actually going up after Cerebrolysin treatments. Yeah, you might not get the exact effects that you're after, because there's a lot of, dubious speculation, conjecture, and incomplete information when it comes to this medication. Still, anecdotally, a lot of people swear by Cerebrolysin. They say that it cured them from their depression. It cured them from their addiction, which I've had several consultations about, where people need to overcome kratom addiction or Adderall addiction or weed addiction or other kinds of addiction, in which case the dosages are quite high. So we're talking about 30 milliliters to 50 milliliters Cerebrolysin intravenously at least 5 times weekly for 1 to 2 months while they're detoxing from their particular addiction, and then they overcome it. Now, that's not always 100% successful. Sometimes these guys need ibogaine treatment, which I'm not very familiar with, to be honest. But there's plenty of clinics that offer a ibogaine service in case you really need to overcome a particular condition. And Cerebrolysin treatment was insufficient to do that by yourself. So after watching this deep dive, if you're still interested in running Cerebrolysin yourself, please give those 2 articles linked down below a read, and then join me for the Cerebrolysin Addendum livestream video dropping a couple days from now. I hope to see you there. So who knows, maybe Cerebrolysin is just a very expensive injectable protein shake from hydrolyzed pig brains, and it might be cheaper to increase brain-derived neurotropic factor levels in the brain continuously by using a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor like fluvoxamine or vortioxetine, just like I did. Let me know if you'd like to see a brain-derived neurotropic factor deep dive in the near future. Subscribe so you don't miss it. As always, make sure you do your blood work. If you live in the United States, you can do that over at Merrick Health. They have excellent patient care coordinators and healthcare providers who can help you interpret your blood work results. In case you're unsure on what's going on within your body, make sure you do your blood work frequently, especially when you start experimenting with cerebrolysin or other kinds of compounds, which could have a modulating effect on your blood work parameters. Health is wealth, so make sure you check your blood work frequently, especially if you're undergoing a lot of self-experimentation. And if you want to increase brain-derived neurotropic factor levels in your brain without doing copious amounts of injections multiple times per week in the daily, then look into Gorilla Mind. They sell curcumin C3 complex, fish oil called omega-3 elixir, and Gorilla Mind Smooth, which contains bacopa monieri and L-theanine, and the Gorilla Mind has several other products which contain L-theanine. All of these are known to increase BDNF levels in the brain. I've linked all of those products down below. And if you don't know where to get Cerebrolysin, well, that's what the website is there for, or the link 3 on my Instagram page. Thank you guys so much for watching. A fully enhanced brain-derived neurotropic factor level in those cannons frontable bicep for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. All of my other affiliates and sponsors you can find down below as well. And I'll see you in the next deep dive, whether that's a brain-derived neurotropic factor deep dive video or a Cortexin deep dive video. I'm sure you guys will let me know down below in the comment section to fuel that algorithm smoothly. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.